Hi folks, and thank you for your time today. This video serves as a quick demo for what I've been working on over the last 2 to 3 months of the practical segment of my dissertation. What you're seeing on screen at the moment is the environment that I appear in after putting on the virtual reality or VR headset. But first, a little bit of context. The aim of my project was to create 3D animations that could be used as a visual aid in a virtual environment such as this for the purpose of enhancing an educational talk or perhaps a school lesson. The literature review that I did in preparation for this project explored the use of augmented reality or AR as a tool to enhance a classroom lesson. So there was a lot of experiments that showed that AR and VR created an improved learning experience, with the primary benefits being increased memory retention, motivation, and collaboration. So the idea is that if you simply hear some information, it may not necessarily stick in your mind. You might need to go home and study it a bit further. However, if you can see and interact with the relevant objects that a teacher is talking about while the information is being delivered, you will more effectively retain that information. Now, aside from some of these 3D models, what you're seeing at the moment is not my work. This is a service provided by a company called Spatial. So think of Spatial as Skype or Zoom, but in 3D. If you had a VR headset at home and were to dial into this meeting that I currently have open, your avatar would appear in here with me, and you could start interacting with me and some of these 3D models that I have built. And it's kind of cool in here. As I move my arms or head in the real world, my avatar does the same in here. I think it's quite relevant in today's pandemic situation, in that we are stuck at home, often using traditional 2D methods to learn or deliver information. For example, with universities providing lectures over Skype or Zoom or similar. Unfortunately, I hit a large issue in that these virtual rooms don't currently, it is coming though, they don't currently support animated 3D objects. So while I could import static 3D objects, I couldn't import anything that moved. I'm just a few months too early. So I had to pivot the project slightly, and instead of bringing the animated data in here, I rendered it out as 2D video. Not the end of the world, as these 2D animations that I produced not only can be brought into this virtual environment, but they still fit with my original goal, which was to create animations that can be used as visual aids for somebody delivering a talk in AR or VR. In terms of the potential educational talk, I settled on the misery that is COVID-19, largely because I thought it'd be fun to create some animations around it with some room for creativity. So just to be clear, my end result is not the educational piece itself. I'm not a teacher, but rather just a set of animations that could be used to enhance a point or perhaps help a student remember some COVID-related information a little more effectively. I'm trying to keep this brief, but I know it is stretching, so I will move on to the animations now that I produced. There's 7 in total, each about 30 seconds to 90 seconds long. However, I just want to very briefly show you how I built each one and what the main goal behind each one was. So, moving swiftly on, this is 3ds Max, the software I use to produce the 3D models and animate them. Now, in all my previous projects on this course, I had only built static 3D objects, so things that don't move. And I wanted to learn something new. I wanted a new challenge, which was to create motion. I wanted to achieve this through the use of a particle simulator, mostly because this leads to cool things like explosions and fire and smoke and water. So this would effectively lay the groundwork for that. For the particle simulator, I settled on a third-party plugin called tyFlow, which is a rewrite of 3ds Max's inbuilt particle simulator. However, I won't delve into technical details. I will save that for the written portion of the report. So first up, scene 1. The concept here was simple. I just wanted to introduce COVID-19. I wanted to build a detailed 3D model of it and pan a camera around it. I spent the bulk of my time trying to get it to feel alive in that it wiggled and almost breathed a little bit, I guess. So please note, I'm not trying to create anything medically accurate, just something memorable for all of these clips. The coils in the middle here expand and contract as this little sphere moves around, and their colors change depending on their height, thanks to a few tyFlow modifiers. All right, scene 2. So this was a coughing man with the message of staying 2 meters or more apart. So after introducing COVID-19, I wanted to show what the infection process might be like, especially if you aren't wearing a face mask and are closer than 2 meters to an infected person. So here I have, let's call it an artistic take on an infected person. And with tyFlow, I'm producing the particles that leave him and fill up the next guy's lungs. I also managed to create a cool effect where the infected man kind of is built or takes shape over the course of the clip. Is slowly created with these splines that are led by glowing green dots. And then finally I managed to create an effect on the recipient's skin of kind of an infected looking substance that was spreading. Getting infected isn't fun, so for this clip I went for some somber music. Since I was now outputting my work as 2D animations, it was kind of fun because it gave me a lot more creative freedom in that I could add music and sound effects and, swap between camera angles. And I ended up spending about a week editing these 7 together, and some of them, as you'll see, I had a bit of fun with trying to make them cinematic. Scene 3. Alright, so this is called Wear a Face Mask, and the idea for this scene came about after repeatedly seeing 2 main types of face mask offenders, as I call them. So the mask around the neck person, and then the mask not covering the nose type of person. Fools, in other words. Now, this was my first experiment with destruction. I decided on judgment from above, as it were, with a couple of COVID particles descending on each offender, causing them to fall and shatter. I left the face masks in place as the particle is now the new host. scene 4, this is the infection spreading. So you haven't stayed 2 meters apart, you haven't worn a mask correctly. Now I wanted to portray what the virus might look like inside of you. And I'd seen a cool video of cells splitting. I wanted to recreate that effect. After several days of failing, I luckily managed to find a tutorial in tyFlow to do most of what I wanted, so I can't take all credit for this scene. I did have a lot of trouble though with my original low poly COVID model. It would often get stuck or come out wildly disfigured, so I ended up having to use this kind of simplified mesh here that you can see, and it still gives the idea that I wanted. And then at the end of the scene I panned to another shot where the lungs are getting filled with thousands of these, but just from a distance. Scene 5, so this is building destruction. So since I tried my hand at a little bit of destruction in an earlier scene, I wanted to up the ante a little bit. The idea for this scene came after one of the more recent lockdowns was announced. I wanted to showcase the dangers of venturing to a public place. So this is a building in Edinburgh that I had created for a previous project. It's a museum, i.e. a public place, so it fit the bill nicely. And I thought it would be fun to reuse some of my old work with tyFlow. So I spawned this kind of quote-unquote COVID storm, and then I've also got a very large COVID particle that breaks through the walls and it pushes out mass amounts of debris. And it's fun to do, and I took a few creative liberties with the clip, adding in some uneasy or scary music and some lightning. So I hope you enjoy it. Scene 6, the vaccine. So this is where things get a little bit more optimistic. After hearing about the vaccine that had been produced, I put together this scene. I was kind of in full swing at this stage, so this is my longest animation at 90 seconds, and I had a whole bunch of different camera angles and quite a bit of work went into it. I have several tyFlow effects at work here. So first up is this animated robot that I downloaded, and I've covered him in the low poly virus that I created, and then I've managed to get him to kind of crawl around him to showcase that he is indeed very infected. Then we've got the cure that arrives, and he gets jabbed in the arm. And then I wanted to transition into the bloodstream, and I managed to get the contents of the injection to swirl and kind of, it's a path follow that they do. They go around the inside of several COVID particles and then blow them up, basically. Very, very scientifically accurate. And then we switch over to the lungs that I previously used, but this time the cure arrives and everything changes from green to blue. And finally we end the scene with the coronavirus falling off of the robot. So I gave them gravity basically after a certain amount of time, but it looks cool. Alright, scene 7, final scene. Thank you for sticking with me. Now this scene was actually the very first 3D scene that I built, a kitchen. In the corner here we've got a sink, and I had always wanted to fill it with water. However, that was a bit too ambitious at the time. So I've revisited it now as a way to close off the project and finally add some water. This idea came to me after I learned that tyFlow can interact with other 3ds Max plugins. In this case, that was Phoenix FD, so that's what I used to create and animate the water. So I spawned some COVID particles and I managed to get them bobbing about nicely in the water. And then I add the soap, and the soap does its work and then destroys the particles, kind of hammering home the message of wash your hands, hopefully. Alright, well, that was all of my animations and everything I wanted to show you. There's another video on my channel which is only these animations, just shown back to back without any of my overbearing commentary, if you want to watch them again. Thank you very much for your time, and good night.